Hello and welcome. My name is Rupert Pontin and I'm Head of Insight and Communications here at Brego. This is the Brego Auto Intel broadcast for June 2026, in which we're going to have a look at what happened in the UK auto retail sector during the last month, as well as a short summary of what has happened in the political position in relation to what has influenced the retail consumer behaviour during the month of June. We'll start with the economic update. So without wishing to dwell on activities in the Middle East, it is fair to say that after a largely successful period of ceasefire, the war has intensified. And as I record this, the Strait of Hormuz is now closed again and bombing has recommenced. Moving on, the UK economy found itself in a bit of a quandary after the resignation of Keir Starmer on June 22nd. This came after a period of heavy speculation, of course, and ultimately Andy Burnham's victory in the Makerfield by-election, which was held on June the 18th. I think that tipped it over for him. Moving to the KPIs, and June looks to have been very steady on the face of it, which is good news, but is it really the truth? So firstly, the inflation rate remained at 2.8%, which has come as a welcome surprise. However, it's unlikely to remain at this level for July, due in part to the 13% lift in the energy price cap. In addition, the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee left the base rate unchanged at 3.75%, and I think that was a unanimous decision, and that was also good news. And of course, those two things together helped the consumer confidence to stay at -23, which again was against expectations, but it's also very welcome for the month. And despite the continued stagnation in the property market, the mortgage rate has actually edged down by 0.2 of a percentage point, and that now sits at 4.9%. But realistically, this is still unlikely to give house sales the boost that they need and get people moving home again. The opening of the Strait of Hormuz, as we know earlier in the month, actually saw the price of a barrel of oil fall quite considerably from $110 at the beginning of May down to $73 at the end of June. And that resulted in a drop in the price of a litre of fuel to £1.51 on average. So on the face of it, we've actually had a better month. But I've got to say, I think there are probably some clouds ahead and we need to be watching out for those. So this is what happened in the UK new car market, and this is data courtesy of the SMMT. June data showed new car registrations totaled 213,166 units, and this was an 11.4% improvement on June 2026, and that's another excellent monthly performance given the economy. It was actually the strongest performance in June since the pandemic in 2020. Private registrations for the month rose by 12.5%. That's off the back of 17.2% in May. And this represented a 37.8% market share, which is down a few percentage points on where it was the previous month. The year-to-date increase is 12.6%, so very, very similar. And that gives a 39.8% market share overall for private registrations. And that is just 0.2 of a percentage point higher than it was in June 2025. Fleet registrations saw an increase of 10.5%. That's off the back of 1.8% the previous month. And that translates to a 59.5% market share. And that is, I think, 0.5 of a percentage point lower than it was last year. Year to date shows an increase of 6.8%, and that means a 58% market share, which is 0.4% down on the previous month. And that's also 1.2 percentage points lower than it was in 2025. EV registration showed an admirable 35% increase year on year, and market share for the month was sitting at 30%, which is good. It was 27.3% last year, but let's not forget the target for 2026 is 33% of all registrations. So that 30% is 5.2 percentage points higher than it was in June 2025. And year-to-date, EVs have a 25% share, and that is 3.4 percentage points ahead of last year. So we're getting there, but really not fast enough, as we know. Plug-in hybrid registrations were up 24.9% with a 12.5% market share, and that's up 1.5 percentage points on June last year. Year to date, that's an increase of 38.4% on the previous year, which is good news. Petrol registrations were down 4% for the month, and market share sat at 39.7% and 6.3 percentage points lower than it was last year. Diesel had quite a bad month, actually, and it was down a significant 24.4% when compared with last year, and that represents a 3.8% share of the market, which is 1.8 percentage points lower than it was in June 2025. So moving to the OEMs and the top three, Volkswagen yet again at 7.6% of the market. That's down from 8.85 last month. Tesla had a good month. I think some ships came in, and Tesla recorded 5.7% of the total market, and BMW came in third with 5.5%. Looking individually in the top 3 sellers, the Tesla Model Y in first place, Tesla Model 3 in second place, and the Ford Puma, which was first last month, sitting in third place. So clearly some good supply of Tesla models just before the end of H1. There were only 2 Chinese models in the top 10 this month, and that was the MG HS and the JQ7. The JQ7 has been in there quite regularly over the past few months. Now, from the Chinese brands on sale in the UK, they took 20.9% of all registrations. I remind you that does include Volvo, Smart and Lotus. MG took 4.9% in first place. Volvo were in second place at 3% and BYD in third percent at 2.9%. Now, I always like to remind you about the Chery Group, and as a whole, they took 6.4% of the market, which is, again, enough to put them in second place overall, all things considered. We've also seen the temporary demise of the first Chinese brand, and that was with the termination of the Skywell importer in the UK. So there'll be no more Skywell new cars sold for the foreseeable future. Those that were still available with Skywell have been sold to a vehicle retailer, and they are on sale in the marketplace. So looking at the UK used car market, and as ever, we're going to be using the Brego Insight. So just a reminder, Brego looks at whole market data, okay? It looks at over 900,000 adverts on a day-by-day basis, and they are added to our comprehensive data set that spans over 20 years worth of data and consists of over 2.2 billion, yes, that's 2.2 billion data points. These, combined with our unique market-leading neural network-based valuation methodology, give our customers world-class data, and of course the insight that goes with that. So what did we see in June? Well, total adverts were up by 0.4%, and this shows a continued level of stability. Sales were also up by 6.6%, which is good news. If anything, there is a little evidence of an increase in used car supply, though, so we just need to keep an eye on that and see how things go next month. Now, pre-reg adverts saw quite a change with an increase of 10.8%, yep, 10.8%. And that is probably due to the fact that June was the end of the first half of the year, and there were sales targets that needed to be met by the dealers to ensure that they received bonuses, and that would have been driven by competitive pricing of the new cars and just getting them into the used car market where they needed to. Trade adverts increased by 5.5%, which suggests that dealers had a little more confidence and have kept forecourts a little bit full. Of course, they've had the choice because, as we said, the volume of vehicles in the wholesale market is a little bit higher. And, of course, an element of the increase in the trade adverts will have been the pre-reg activity. EV adverts dropped by 1.9%. That's off the back of a 12.8% drop the previous month. Now, that could be due to improved sales, obviously eating away at the stock on sale, or it could be that there's less stock in the market. Now, we know that EVs have been a strong focus for consumers as they seek to offset the higher fuel costs we've had, but this is something to watch closely going forward. And of course, now we've seen a drop in the cost of fossil fuel, so that has probably helped take the urgency away from people buying an EV. Hybrid adverts dropped by 0.6%, and consumers, to be fair, are still keen to reduce running costs, but they are still a little bit wary of jumping all the way into an EV. Petrol adverts increased by 0.8% and diesels increased by the same amount. I think this is down to a softening in demand that we had seen for traditional fuel types, but again, worthy of deeper investigation. And those of you as customers that have the Brego Insight tool can do that for yourself. So that's good news. As we know, if we're looking at sales, they did increase by 6.6% overall, and that was a good result. Although I've got to say it was hard fought for. There was a slow start to the month. First couple of weeks were quite slow, and a number of dealers were really worried about what was going to happen. But the second half of the month, there's been greater traction. They were able to pull through and record that 6.6% increase. Days to sale increased to 39 from 38, which is sort of reflective of the first part of the month being slower. However, EV days to sale improved by 2 days, taking them to 35 days, and that generally reflects the demand that we've seen for electric propulsion over the past couple of months or so, obviously the reduced running costs. Now, the average used car sale price was £16,916, and the average sale price for an EV was £23,285, and finally the average hybrid price was £23,792. So to summarise, the Brego Auto Intel for June 2026, despite a slow start to the month, the UK auto sector really did work hard to get a new result. New car sales improved by 11.4%, used car sales by 6.6%. And as I said, footfall and inquiries did improve in the last 2 weeks, and that helped. Although it has to be said, closing deals was harder than it has been for some time for many people in the market. Used EV demand tailed off a little, and this is in part due to the drop in the price of fuel, although stock supply also seemed to be a little restricted. Used EVs accounted for 7.5% of total used car sales, and that is compared with 7.8% in May. So again, a little bit of a tail off because it was higher in April. Hybrid demand improved a little, and there are still a lot of consumers out there that are looking to reduce running costs, but still scared to make that full jump across from fossil fuel straight into an EV. Wholesale demand has been a little patchy again, and conversion rates have been varied at the auctions, which is, I guess, to be expected when you've got this kind of retail marketplace in front of you. Condition is still important. Buyers are looking to buy the best possible stock that requires a minimum amount of prep, so they're keeping costs down and trying to maximize on that margin that is available to them. And finally, looking at Chinese cars, there were 30,358 cars advertised in June 2026, and of those, there were 12,931 cars sold. And that in total represented 3.4% of the total used car sales. Now, I will just add that that does include figures for Volvo, Smart, and Lotus, and it is just 1.1 of a percentage point better than it was in May. So look, I know you will all have found this an invaluable review of the UK auto sector, but if you need more guidance and insight, then please read the Brego Monthly Car Insight Report. Now that can be found on the Brego LinkedIn page and also on our website. Alternatively, just reach out to me either by phone, email, or LinkedIn, and I can forward that to you. Brego are now also posting insight and updates on our YouTube channel, and that's called Brego-Official. So please feel free to have a look there. You can see the older videos as well. In addition to which, we are also a sponsor of the Dealerway DealerPod weekly podcast. Now that's hosted by Stephen Douglas along with Scott Sibley and Jamie Capel, and is an invaluable guide as to what's happened in the marketplace on a week-by-week basis. We've also teamed up with Most Trade Radio, and we are their trade values partner, and we're working with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, giving a monthly summary of used car activity in the UK market from a trade perspective. So finally, I just want to reiterate that if you want to improve your market insight and your understanding of the nuances in today's UK auto sector, you need to speak to the Brego team, okay? Andy, Safi, and Nick would be delighted to show you how the Brego pricing and market data will help you, and that will show you how to understand the market better as a whole, and of course set better relevant strategies with the ultimate goal of improving profitability for your business. So remember, the team won't bite. They're here to empower you. Thank you very much indeed for listening through, and I look forward to seeing you next month.